Harper Perennial Political Classics and Harper Audio present The Making of the President, 1960, by Theodore H. White. Read by Wayne Mitchell. Foreword by Robert Dallek. In 1961, when Theodore White, his friends called him Teddy, published The Making of the President, 1960, he had already established a reputation as a prominent journalist who not only reported events, but also tried to influence them. As a Harvard graduate in 1938 with a major in Chinese history, White won a fellowship that took him to Chongqing, China, where he shortly became Time magazine's correspondent. Eager to provide honest accounts of tumultuous wartime events, including the corruption of and simmering revolutionary opposition to Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist regime, White clashed with Chiang's censors and Henry Luce, Time's publisher, whose editors whitewashed White's accounts of nationalist failings. White went on to write Thunder Out of China, a book that told the ugly truth about Chiang's repressive and increasingly unpopular government. White's revelations echoed the complaints of U.S. Foreign Service officers in China, who foresaw the nationalist collapse in a civil war with Mao Zedong's communists. White spent 6 years in Europe between 1948 and 1953, reporting on the evolving Cold War. But his passion to shape, as much as to record, events brought him back to the United States, where he aimed to explain the nation's changing political culture. He saw no better way to understand and then educate the public about contemporary affairs than by a pioneering account of a presidential election. And 1960 seemed like an especially good moment. The contest between Richard Nixon, the first sitting vice president to run for the presidency since Martin Van Buren in 1836, and the first Californian to reach for the White House, and John F. Kennedy, a candidate who could become the first Catholic and youngest man ever elected to the office, made 1960 a landmark occasion. The Making of the President, 1960, which appeared in 1961, was an instant bestseller that was lauded as revolutionizing political reporting. In the past, newspapers and magazines had assigned journalists to cover the day-to-day developments in campaigns, but White was the first to convert such coverage into an instant book. It became the most successful of 4 presidential election volumes that covered the next 3 campaigns as well. In his introduction to a 1988 reissue of this first installment in the series, New York Times columnist James Reston described the book's enduring impact, noting that White didn't cover only the candidates, he covered America. As Reston saw it, and as White intended, the book was a window on a changing nation. From the perspective of 2009, White's recounting of the 1960 contest is both a history and an artifact of its era. White certainly captured the drama of this closest of elections. His penned portraits of John Kennedy and Richard Nixon and their rivals for the nomination, Adlai Stevenson, Hubert Humphrey, Lyndon Johnson, and Stuart Symington in the Democratic camp, and Nelson Rockefeller on the Republican side, remain demonstrations of White's mastery of biographical detail. But it wasn't only the candidates for the highest office he brought to life. It was also the men around them, JFK's brothers, Bobby and Ted. Ted Sorensen, Kennedy's speechwriter, and Kennedy's Boston Mafia and Nixon's California associates who managed and implemented the campaigns. There is much in White's book that has taken a permanent place in the histories and biographies covering the 1960 election. His descriptions of the Democratic primaries, both parties' conventions, the Nixon-Kennedy debates, the campaign strategies each side used to put the other in an unfavorable light, including their respective responses to civil rights and the black vote, and the analysis of the final tally remain essential reading in any effort to grasp the struggle for ballots and the outcome that gave Kennedy an advantage of 1/10 of a point, 49.7% to 49.6% for Nixon, with another 0.7% of the vote going to other candidates. White's memorable description of the differences between Kennedy and Nixon before the cameras in the first debate resonates still. Kennedy was calm and nerveless and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?